Here we go. Thank you for that reminder. So it's so amazing to see everybody here tonight. The reason that we are here is because we have so much at stake here in North Carolina, right? There are 61 days till the midterm election. 61 days to elect the leader that we need. Somebody who will listen, someone who will take action, and someone that will do what we need them to do when they get to Washington, right? But before we get too far into our program, I want to share a little video with you about Down Home, North Carolina. And I think that will answer some of your questions about what we do. So if you could kind of roll that beautiful bean footage. Does everybody remember that commercial? Or am I dating myself? I guess, okay, it's just me.
Not getting sound. Is supposed to be sound?
Yeah, the sound isn't playing. Always technical difficulties. We'll get it. Thank you.
You cannot win elections in North Carolina without engaging in rural and small town communities. Out of the 100 counties in North Carolina, 80 are rural. And if you only focus on the cities, you are literally missing out on the entirety of the state.
People just feel like they don't matter. People feel like their voices don't matter. People feel like they can't get changed because politics is looked at on a national level. And I try to explain to them that it's like the Chamber of Commerce. You got to think local first.
We're joined with the common purpose of improving the political voice of poor and working class people, which is desperately needed under our current political situation.
But you need organizations that build relationships in those communities to unleash that progressive power.
How Down Home addresses that is through routine unity meetings where the members are determining the direction and actions of our local chapters. So it's all grassroots power, and that's what we direct upward through the leadership in our government.
But if you actually on the ground and building, relationships with people, then you're able to really put in the work and have the experience to teach others. And that's the biggest thing about Down Home. It's each one teach one. Is you bring something to the table and then you teach those at the table while also learning from the table.
At Down Home, North Carolina, we don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. What we care about are what issues matter to you and what solutions you want to see.
We reach out to the people that nobody reaches out to. We make sure that their issues are known, and that makes them want to participate more, linking them to local officials that also share their values or want to see things change.
We can and have been changing non-voters into voters once they start hearing about issues and opportunities to vote from people they know and trust.
There is no progressive path to power in North Carolina without rural communities. And Down Home, North Carolina will deliver that to you. You are home with Down Home, North Carolina.
That is a great video. I love it. It gets me every time. I've been with Down Home for 2 years now, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here. As Bridget said in that video, across North Carolina. I want to give you a brief look at our agenda. If you could put that slide presentation up one more time for me. Okay, thank you. Here's what we're going to cover tonight. First, we already covered kind of some of the introductions, right? But we're going to do a little more of that. And then we're going to reflect in small groups. And then we have some special guests in the form of videos from Senator Woodward and Martin Luther King III. And then we're going to talk, I mentioned I'm a deep canvas manager. We're going to talk about what deep canvassing really is, and how we use it to reach folks. And then we're going to share with you our plan to win. We're going to have a quick call to action, and then we're going to close. And then after the program is over, if you have questions while we're going through the program, please feel free to write them down. I will stay. The team that we have here at Down Home, North Carolina will stay after this presentation, and we'll answer any questions that you might have about what we've covered or how you can get involved. Thank you. If you could take that down. So I mentioned that we have a lot at stake here in North Carolina. You know, off the top of my head, right? Women's right to choose. Reproductive freedom, right? Medicaid expansion. We've been working on that for years, right? We've got prescription drug costs that are through the roof. That's not right. And we also have an economy that's not working for everybody. We have working poor here, right? You know, during COVID, the schools in my area made sure that every child had a lunch. And then when they went back to school, they made sure every child had breakfast and lunch. And now, just recently, they're back to their old ways. Everybody has to qualify. You know, if we could do that during COVID, why do we have hungry children here in North Carolina, right? We can solve this. We really can. We need Sherry Beasley. She is an amazing candidate, amazing. And if we can get her elected, or should I say when we get her elected, she will be the first African-American woman senator to represent North Carolina. The very first. And she'll do a great job. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Sherry as we go through the program. But first, I want to let everybody get a chance to kind of get to know each other in small groups. And I have some questions that I would love for you to kind of reflect on. The first question is, what's at stake for you in this election? What's at stake for you? I will share what's at stake for me. My Aunt Cleo, my father's oldest sister, I never met her. I didn't get an opportunity. She was the first person in his family to go to college. They had 15 kids and they were dirt poor. So that my grandmother saved to put her through college. And that first year she came home and she was pregnant. And my grandmother was upset. My Aunt Cleo was upset, obviously. She wanted to continue college. You know, she was getting out, is the way she looked at it. So my grandmother arranged for a midwife to perform an abortion. And my Aunt Cleo got an infection. And my dad, who was 9 at the time, as I mentioned, watched his oldest sister, his hero, slowly die. That's one of the things that we have at stake here, right? A person's right to choose. One of the other things that I think about when I think about this election is I have 3 girls, 3 great kids. I want them to have a quality education. I want them to be able to buy a house someday. And the way things are right now, I'm not sure that that's possible. So that's just one question I want you to reflect on. What's at stake for you in this election? My other question is, sorry, I lost my place. My other question is, what do you see for yourself and your family, your loved ones? What do you want? What do you see for yourselves? And then finally, what can we win? If Sherry's elected, what can we win? So I'm going to ask that we set up the breakout rooms now, and we're going to have a moderator in each of the breakout rooms with you to kind of help you reflect on these questions. And then we'll come back together and we'll talk about what you learned, what we've learned, and what you talked about. Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to find out about what that experience was like for you. Right now, I'm going to call on our moderators and ask them to kind of summarize what they heard from everybody. And I hope that that was a pretty good experience for you to not only share why this election is important to you, what's important to you and your family, but also hear from others what's important to them. Because I think there's always something to be gained from another person's perspective. So I'm going to start with Arndrea. Do you mind coming off mute and sharing with us what you heard in your breakout room?
Of course not. So my name is Arndrea, and I had an amazing breakout group. It was very heartfelt and very true information. At least that's what I believed. And the first question was, what's at stake for you in this election? And what I heard was they were worried for their children and the future of their children, and specifically the rights to choose and the rights for disempowered people. And what they meant by that was specifically for their trans son, and what that future would look like for them. You know, it's scary.
Yeah.
And the last one was the environment for our children, and specifically the economy and what their future would look like, considering how it is right now. It's pretty chaotic, you know. Like, what is their future going to look like? Yeah. The second question is, what do you want to see for yourself, for your family, and for your loved ones? There was one that I thought was amazing: inclusion. Building a life that is good for you. You know, it's not for one specific side or person. Sorry. And then also the misinformation of the news, how it creates division and through rage and fear. That was another one. And the last one is, what can we win? And one of them was the criminal justice reform through Sherry Beasley, considering how informed she is with that. And then regulating prices on healthcare to include more and to make it more affordable for people. And Medicaid expansion, of course. Well, we hope. And that was my group.
Thank you so much, Arndrea. That was wonderful. Okay, I want to call on Amanda. Amanda, do you mind sharing what you heard in your group?
Absolutely. Hi, guys. I'm Amanda. I had a wonderful group as well. We talked about a few different issues. We talked a lot about, we did talk about reproductive rights, but not just solely reproductive rights. We talked a lot about privacy and freedom for, people, everybody, but particularly women and people that identify as women, and having their privacy within them and their doctor, from like contraception to reproductive freedoms and so forth. We also talked about climate change and the need to care for our planet. That's super important. I also heard education, teacher pay raises. We need to pay our teachers more. We're losing teachers out of North Carolina, and we need to fund our schools. Funding our public schools. I also heard LGBTQ rights that goes alongside of like the privacy rights that are being taken away. And then I also heard drug prices. So, and a really neat point I learned, that one way that we could possibly lower drug prices is a beautiful woman, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but a beautiful woman reminded us that we took cigarette advertisements off of TV. We could do the same with drugs, because we see so many drug commercials. So that was really cool. And we talked about housing. Housing is a big deal. People are getting kicked out of their house. Rents are going through the roof. So it's just not working. And then lastly, we talked about something that we would win out of getting Sherry Beasley elected would be representation for everybody in North Carolina and diversity in leadership.
Thank you. That's awesome. That was a good group. Thank you very much, Amanda. I appreciate that. Christine, do you mind sharing what you heard in your group, please?
Yeah, our group went very deep, very quickly. And really, we really launched right into what's at stake for you in this election and for our family and our loved ones. Our very lives are at stake. It's not hyperbole. If you're gender fluid, non-binary, trans, your life is in danger. If you are a person who might give birth or could suffer from reproductive health issues, you can lose your life. The other things that are at stake, again, have to do with real things like our climate, our earth. What kind of future do our children have? There was one comment that kind of encapsulated the kind of feeling state of the group, which is when will we stop the madness? There was a sense that, there's more than policy and procedures, our country and our state at stake, that actually it's our morals. Like, do we care for each other or just ourselves? What's the best for everyone? Or do we only care for only the select few? There was a sense like what we really are looking for is a place that's in a space that's more accepting and less polarized as a country. And I think the other thing that I would just add is that there are so many things that Ted Budd has supported or represents that we cannot afford to lose this moment in this time and this space.
Wow. Thank you, Christine. I really like the stop the madness, right? Stop the madness. Can we hear from Donna, please?
Good evening, everyone that I haven't said good evening to. What I heard this evening was similar to what Alondra said at the beginning, talking about children's future. And so it appears to me that children's future is something that more than parents probably are concerned about. But there was also talk about the climate and the earth, democracy and fair treatment. There was quite a bit of talk about inclusion. We talked about speaking truth. And in fact, the term that was used is the true truth. So if I got that right. And so a true voice, a voice of the people, allies of the people, progress. There was one instance where a person said, be present, show up.
Show up.
Yeah. How can you do all these things if you're not there? And so that was very good. And just representing the voice of the people, to summarize all of that. And I think it all goes to if whatever it is that we would like to see happen is represented and is spoken, then that will cover most of what was said on this evening in our group. Thanks.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you very much. I'd love to hear from Esperanza and what happened in your group.
Sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. She just started moving all around as soon as I get called on. But hello, everyone. My name is Esperanza. I had a really great group. we talked a lot about, a bunch of different issues, mainly being education. So we talked a little bit about, Roe v. Wade, a little bit about Social Security and voting rights, but it felt like what we were mainly talking about was education and that support for teachers, that was said earlier, more teacher pay, funding our schools better, but also, allowing teachers to teach the truth, teach history. And so kind of talked a little bit about, banning of books and the restricting of curriculum and things like that, and kind of the way that the other party might be strategizing, having teachers that were parents in the classroom when, parents have never necessarily left the classroom. So kind of really focused our discussion on that. And then when we were talking about, what does winning look like for us and for our state, it looks like cooperation, and it looks like for, a more fair and just state for everyone in it. And so that was kind of, the majority of our conversation. And I just thought it was really good, and I was really excited to talk to everyone.
Thank you, Esperanza. Thank you. We're seeing kind of some themes here, right? Can I get Lucy to come off mute and share what you learned in your group?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like everybody on this call with us tonight is like very aligned on a lot of the issues, because we heard very similar things in my group, from housing to healthcare cost, kind of just the fear of the divisiveness of our country for so many people that are still following this person that lied for 4 years to all of us and is still lying to us about what's happening and what he's doing. I think as far as like what we want to see for our loved ones, something that really stuck out to me, and I also feel much the same way as Sam did when they shared this with us, but it's just kind of the taste of student loan forgiveness that we got. Felt great. Would love to see more of that. And then also take it a little bit more and maybe apply it to like medical debt as well. And just really making sure that we're leaving this place so much better than how it is right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. That was amazing. Nico, would you share with us, please?
We had some really passionate folks in our group. We had a really good discussion. So first of all, Tanya brought up healthcare, the expansion of Medicaid, which we've been trying to get that passed for 10 years now in North Carolina. And it's impacted me. It's impacted so much of North Carolina. North Carolinians still struggle to afford medication. We heard from Kim, who said, she's not naive. Racism, white supremacy, that's a part of the American way of life. But it has been so emboldened, right, by this former president and by the right-wing neo-fascists. So we're talking about really big things, life or death things. I don't think it's hyperbolic to say this election's about life or death. And we also talked about gerrymandering. How can we put into place progressive legislation if we have racist gerrymandering preventing us from taking action electorally? So it was a really lively discussion, and it looks like folks are here tonight to talk about the issues that really matter to them.
Yeah, thank you, Nico. Thank you. Shannon, would you mind sharing with us?
Sure. So our group pretty much, I guess everybody, like Lucy and Nico said, is pretty much aligned with everyone because everyone is kind of on the same things. My group did talk about our democracy being at stake. They talked about GOP changing the Constitution, getting people in that 18 to 30 crowd just to come out and vote and to try to get them aware and get them involved. They feel, we talked about schools being at stake, putting the right people in our school boards, and, you know, not putting the right people in our school boards. And, you know, we had a teacher in our group, you know, saying that she was kind of afraid to talk about anything because she didn't want to lose her job because they have that critical race theory going on. And everything else was pretty much the same. Women to have equality and not to feel like second-class citizens, you know.
Yeah.
Letting children know that their future is bleak, and you know, we also talked about how North Carolina cut free tax week and, you know, put money into other things when it should be going back into the community.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Shannon. We just have one more. Zakia, I believe it's just one more. Zakia, do you mind sharing with us what you heard in your group?
Absolutely. So a lot, honestly, all of these issues that everyone has talked about before me have shown up in my group as well. My group was wonderful. Thank y'all so much. There's a lot at stake right now. Housing came up, affordability across generations, disinformation and forces that are driving our communities apart from each other seem to be really loud right now. The safety of our students came up, education quality came up, gun control came up, Roe v. Wade, of course, autonomy, privacy, the right to choose, and the economy for working folks. It's not working for working folks. So for what folks want to see for themselves and their community was really rooted in community care. Someone said, what kind of world are we leaving behind? Let's think about what kind of world we're creating 7 generations from now. And that we're at a tipping point where we've really got to get active and be a part of finding the solution for all of us. And folks were really excited about winning better representation for us, for the people, for people of color, for working class and poor folks, and building a bench of elected leaders from folks with actual lived experience. Medicaid expansion, excitement around student loan forgiveness. Let's get more of those victories.
Yeah.
That was my group, y'all.
Thank you, Zakia. And I forgot we have Rian. Rian, do you mind sharing with us your group? Because we want to make sure that everybody's voice is represented tonight.
No, I'm glad that I get to do it right now because I get to do the whole shock of this is going to be crazy, but my group actually said a lot of the same things. I know it's crazy. So in the first question, we really got into the first question, and it got popping with the failure of the current conservative government and how that has been allowed, and there should be something done about that. Roe v. Wade definitely came up. We got to talking about the Supreme Court. Went on attention about school funding and how school funding is going down, and we need to improve there. Gerrymandering got mentioned. Trump and how the Supreme Court was able to be empowered to be able to do what they're doing was mentioned. LGBTQIA rights being questioned now because of what was at stake in this voting election. Reproductive rights, and then affordable housing was another thing.
Yeah.
And at the very, it was really getting popping. It was really getting popping. And we was about to start connecting dots. And that was when it was like the breakout was over. Damn it. So, yeah. No.
There's never enough time.
Right.
Sorry
right.
about that. I know.
That's
I know.
right.
Thank you, Rian. I appreciate it. Wow. So I took notes. I am old school. I've got pages of notes. I've got them in the margins. You know, but what occurs to me is that this is a very diverse group. We probably have 80 people on here, and we all want the same thing, right? We want decent housing, want decent jobs that pay a living wage, We want to be able to have proper medical care, excuse me. We want to be able to pay for our prescription drugs. We want a future for our kids. You know, that shouldn't be so much to ask for, right? Decent schools. Stop banning books that we've been reading for years. You know, housing. I don't know how my kids are going to ever afford a place of their own. I was looking forward to being an empty nester, folks. You know, and I'm not sure anymore, right?
I think that might be a pipe dream.
Yeah. You know, I think a couple of others I'll mention from my notes here. Racism, alive and well, never died, right? Those of us that have experienced it know the trauma doesn't go away, right? You know, LGBTQAI rights, that's on the block. They signaled that with the last Supreme Court decision. We know. Women's reproductive rights. You know, it's time we all got involved. And we're going to talk a lot about getting involved tonight because we have the power to make a difference. Phone calls, knocking doors. We have that power, our vote. Did I mention 61 days? 61 days until the midterm elections. 61 days to see the changes that you all talked about in your groups. That's how long we have. But we can do this. Sherry Beasley is an excellent candidate. An excellent candidate. She believes in all of these things: climate change, reproductive rights, funding our schools. All of the things you mentioned, she believes in, and she's ready to champion for in Washington. But it's going to take us, right? We have to do the work to help her get there. So we're going to drop a link in the chat. And I want you to think about getting involved and joining us, because this is a fight we can win. This is doable. We can do this. We can definitely do this. Right now, I'm going to change gears a little bit, and I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine and a coworker, Amanda Baker.
Hi, guys. My name is Amanda, and I'm a Deep Canvas team lead with Down Home, North Carolina. And I started working with Down Home in 2020 when I realized that I wanted to understand a little bit more about why the people in my community held the opinions that they held in the wake of the death of George Floyd. My social circle sort of fractured in that instance, and I really wanted to figure out why. So I joined Down Home, and one of the reasons I did is because I spoke with our executive director, Dreama Caldwell, and you'll be hearing from her in just a minute. But she gave me some of the best advice that I still think about to this day. She said, "It's great to be an ally. It's better to be a co-conspirator for change." And that changed how I viewed my entire role in this movement. I went from being a sympathetic bystander to taking action as an empathetic change maker in this fight. And for a long time, I worked canvassing with Down Home, so I can talk to you about all of the inner workings of our organization and the member-led decisions that drive our focus. So I joined as a member, and I was involved in a lot of different working groups like co-governance group, election planning group, and I did a lot of canvasses. I did canvasses on the phones. I did canvasses on the streets. I reached out to my neighbors, and I had real conversations about lived experiences and how we want to see our community change for the better. And that was one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had, listening to community members tell vulnerable stories and sometimes heartbreaking stories, and talk about the things that they need and want out of their elected officials. I worked with other down home members to make a framework after those canvases for what we heard, and we worked to build an idea of governance that would work for us and our neighbors. And once our community's concerns were very clearly defined, then we started talking to candidates. And we talked to them in Zoom meetings, we talked to them one-on-one, we went to town halls, we went to campaign events, we stopped them on the street when we saw them. And we asked the hard questions. And we made sure that the voices we heard on the streets were the same ones that were being heard in the rooms of power that these people were in. And our group then, we built profiles for each candidate that we talked to. And we took it back to our members and to our neighbors. And we chose candidates that would work to make North Carolina a place that values people and all the people, and will take steps needed to ensure their constituents were represented fairly. So we took those profiles back to our members, and then we talked about it. And we made a decision as a group, and we made an endorsement. And I saw such potential in this way of endorsing that I then joined Down Home's Deep Canvas team, which is where I am now, to help draw more stories and more lived experiences from our population, from our neighbors, from our friends, so we can focus on endorsing the candidates that'll institute real change. And I'm here to tell you guys, I have made lifelong friends on these calls. I have heard stories that have revived my soul and my faith and solidified my own solidarity in this movement and my own power. And I'm hopeful that all of you will come and do the same with us on these calls. When we open our hearts and we put down our talking points, we can build beautiful connections that'll sustain us as we fight for the future. So now, from Senator Woodard, who is continuously working hard for North Carolinians, he has a special message to pour into our cups about perseverance in organizing and the power that each one of us hold. So if we could let Mr. Woodard.
To all the great people of Down Home, North Carolina, thank you for what you're doing. We often hear this is the most important election of our lifetime. We've heard it so many times, we just kind of goes through us. Let me say this is the most consequential election of our lifetime. So many things hang in the balance of what happens at the national level, at the local level, but I'm going to encourage you to work hard for our state candidates in the General Assembly. Expansion of Medicaid, education, economic development, continuing to recover from the pandemic. These are all things that are on the agenda. And we need people with Down Home North Carolina's values here in the General Assembly representing you. You've already been working hard, and I'm going to ask you in these last few weeks of the election to press a little bit harder. Make a few more calls, knock a few more doors, sign up a few more voters, and share your message. If you all keep fighting and keep the faith, I'm confident we can make North Carolina a much better place to live.
Thank you to Senator Woodard for that message. Progress in our country has always relied on community organizers. Organizers were the key to the historical victories in the women's suffrage movement, in the civil rights era, and in the marriage equality. Organizers have had few long-term allies beyond the election. And we know that the work of year-round organizing is what builds the power that we need to transform North Carolina. The dream of building a multiracial, multicultural democracy that prioritizes social justice for all of us is still in reach. Martin Luther King III and Arndrea Waters King are continuing the legacy that was built by Dr. Martin Luther King. I am excited to say that Down Home, along with our several other state partners will be a part of the Drum Major Coalition. This coalition is organizations across the country working to make the realization of democracy for everyone. This is a 4-year commitment that we have, that we will be in partnership with the Kings. And we are excited to share a message from a message from Martin Luther King.
The video, yeah, the audio's.
There we go.
I'm Martin Luther King III. And we are so honored and happy to have a moment to address you all this evening. We were trying to be here live with you, but our daughter's schedule actually permitted us from doing so. But we wanted to at least join you in spirit to let you know how critical and important this moment is for our nation and our world. As you all know, the Voting Rights Act was basically desecrated, which was a crowning achievement of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., his team, and Coretta Scott King. And it is incredible to think that our daughter, his only granddaughter, Yolanda Renee King, at this moment, she's sitting with less voting rights and less rights, period, than the day that she was born. And we say that because of the Voting Rights Act being gutted. We say that because we live here in the state of Georgia that has one of the most repressive and draconian laws on the books. And we also say that as we see what happened very recently as it relates to the freedom of choice for her body with Roe v. Wade. And I can't help but just think and reflect about what her grandparents would think of that after dedicating their lives for freedom and for justice and for all of us. And the thing that gives me and us hope at those moments is the knowledge that groups like Down Home North Carolina, that all of the volunteers like you, that people are standing up and standing for a democracy that protects all of her citizens, that we're standing for laws that lift us all up and not limit us. So again, we know that this couldn't be done very much during the civil rights movement without everyone joining in and doing their part. And we, from the depths of our souls and our being, we thank you for doing that.
You know, my father used to say that a voteless people is a powerless people. And one of the most important steps that one can take is that short step to the ballot box. We are so honored and humbled to be able to join you this evening virtually, to be able to work with Down Home North Carolina. And I want to first say to the leadership of Down Home, as well as all of you that are volunteering to help. It is amazing that a few good women and men have come together to forecast and create change within your state. It's really sad, however, that we should even have to be doing this in 2022. But as Arndrea said, when the Voting Rights Act was decimated in 2013, we around the nation have been working very diligently to restore and elevate voting rights to make sure that no one is encumbered. And that is what Down Home has been doing in a very significant way in North Carolina, but could not be doing without each and every one of you. Now is the time to bring about change. If you're concerned about healthcare, now is the time. If you're concerned about reproductive rights, now is the time to be engaged. If you're concerned about violence in our communities, now is the time to bring out all of the people or candidates who are going to vote to bolster what the people of North Carolina want in the United States government, at your state and local government levels as well. We don't have an election to miss. We should be engaged in every election. One of the reasons that success is going to happen this time is because you are there, initially making calls, perhaps knocking on doors, perhaps just getting on your phone at home after you've left a down home office to encourage 10 people to vote, who will then encourage 10 people, who will encourage 10 people. And at the end of the day in November, we will see a victory in North Carolina and a victory in our nation. John Lewis, our late congressman, used to talk about getting into good trouble. Good trouble is transformative. Good trouble changes our communities. And so I end by saying, don't give up, don't give out, don't give in. Keep moving forward. Thank you down home, North Carolina, for all that you are doing in the state of North Carolina and really for our nation. Thank y'all.
That was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I
Pretty
hope you all
powerful.
enjoyed that message.
Yeah, you know, couple of things I want to point out, folks. First, I want to ask, y'all ready to get into some good trouble? Because now is the time. Now is the time. 61 days. 61 days to the next election. We need to be engaged in every election. You know, we are 3 seats away from a supermajority in the state house. You know what that means? If Republicans take control, there's nothing that Governor Cooper can do. He won't have the ability to make the changes that we need here, to make the changes that you all listed out. Now's the time. So we're dropping the link. Please sign up. Please join us. Make some calls with us. I promise you, you will get more out of it than you give. Every person you talk to is going to be grateful for the opportunity that you had tonight of sharing their view, sharing their issue. So join us. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Arndrea, who is going to be talking to us a little bit about what her experience was with deep canvassing. Arndrea?
Hello, everyone. I'm Arndrea, and I'm a fellow with Down Home, but I've been working with Bonnie and her crew for the past 2.5 months in deep canvassing. And in that time, what I believe deep canvassing to be is creating connections and understanding through sharing stories and listening without judgment. And the first day I had training, I had no expectations. I didn't know what deep canvassing was when we started to go over the training, and I was excited and a little nervous to learn about it. I felt that I already did this with people in my life, but now I was doing it over the phone. The same day as the training, we started calls. And when Bonnie told us that we were going to start calling, the fear kicked into gear for sure. Questions I was asking myself: what if I forget my lines? What if I don't know enough? And what if I'm not actually good at it? I pushed through and I had a few hangups. I didn't take it personally because I would have done the same thing if I were on the other end. But I had someone who did take the time to listen to my script, even though I was tripping over my words and not sure what to say half the time. I was able to connect in the way he felt safe enough to share his perspective without judgment. He shared with me his concern in not having mental health programs for the youth in your rural areas. Starting these calls, this was my ultimate goal when deep canvassing, giving the other person space to be heard. I was filled with excitement that I was able to have one person open up to me that night. And I still get nervous when making these calls. But it's something worth pushing through to connect and give the chance for our people in rural areas to be heard. And finally, I want to share a story that stayed with me since I've started deep canvassing. There was a woman who answered the phone and she spoke Spanish. I asked her if she had any concerns in her community, and she said no. So I asked her, what were your opinions on deportation and how immigrants are treated? She said to me, I believe that if they had been deported, then there must have been a reason unknown to us. Her explanation was that she was an immigrant for 12 years and never experienced mistreatment. That she went to work and to the grocery store and never acted out. She continued to say that if you didn't behave here, then you would be sent back to Mexico, where there is no order. I understood her perspective. There are many Latinos in my community who live this way. They're okay with the bare minimum, that it's better than what it was. I try to give a different perspective. She was standing strong in her perspective, and I respected it and let her go. But this brought up sadness and understanding for me. Sadness because she believed that every action taken against an immigrant, they deserved. But understanding her fear of returning to Mexico is stronger than her desire for a just life. This only reinforces for me the change we need. I was blessed to have parents who fought for a better life when I was young. And now I want to help others come to a realization that they deserve to have their needs met and they deserve to be treated as human beings, no less. This is my reason for deep canvassing. Thank you so much. And I will pass it on to Dreama Caldwell, our executive co-director.
Thank you, Arndrea. I really want to take a moment to say thanks to Arndrea because she's with our fellowship program and I know how nervous she was. Arndrea, you did great. Good evening, y'all. As they've said, my name is Dreama Caldwell. I am the executive co-director here at Down Home. But Down Home is my political home. I did not enter Down Home as staff. I came to Down Home as a member. Following a stint with the criminal justice system, I had encountered the cash bail system. And for the first time, I realized that I was truly being criminalized because I was poor, which is what happened with cash bail. Because I couldn't afford my bail, I was being criminalized. And I continue to meet people who were in that position, people who lost their jobs, who lost their children to the system, who lost their homes over things that they could have went home for and waited for trial. And so I came to Down Home because I was a little raw from that experience and I didn't know what to do or know how to fight. And so I was on Facebook one day and a targeted ad came up talking about working class issues. And I thought, sounds like what I just experienced, working class issues. So I reached out and answered the ad, and Juan, who was an organizer in Alamance County where I lived at that time, reached out and came to my hometown and had a coffee with me at the coffee shop. And we sat for 2 hours talking. And he told me about this project called Down Home. And we were going to build a bigger we. We were going to build a multiracial, multicultural group of people who were going to fight back and were going to push back, and they were going to fight for the issues that were important to them. And so he invited me over into the office because I still wasn't sold yet. I lived in a town that was still divided by the railroad tracks, where Black people lived on one side and white people lived on the other side. And we didn't do a lot of intermingling. So I wasn't sure that I could trust this. And so I came into the office, and when I came into the office, there was butcher paper hanging up, and it had listed out every single municipality elected official. I had been voting since I was 18 years old. And as I stood in that room looking at that paper of all of those names on that paper, I realized I didn't know who any of those people were. Surely I must have either voted for them or not voted for them, but I didn't know. And that's when I knew I needed to be at Down Home to learn more about the process. And so I came into Down Home. I joined working groups, joined a co-governance working group. I joined a criminalizing the poor working group, where we were able to create the Alamance County Bail Fund, which continues today, that helps to bail out people who are in jail and not able to afford their bails, for they're there for $2,000 or less. And so after joining the bail fund and creating the bail fund, I went over to the co-governance group and started attending meetings in our county. And when I attended the county commissioner meeting, the first thing when I walked in, no one looked like me. That was the initial shock. And then as I continued to attend those meetings, not only did no one look like me, the conversations that were going on in the room did not pertain to working people. Working people's needs were not being brought to the table. And so in 2020, I ran for county commissioner in Alamance County and spent that time on the campaign trail finding out why people weren't voting. I really wanted to know why people weren't engaged. And I heard things like, I don't even understand what's happening. You know, we get the civics lessons a long time before we're able to vote. And so people had forgotten this process. And then there were people who said, I've actually voted every year and my life has never gotten any better. So why should I miss work? Why should I stand in line? Why should I vote if my life is not improving? And then there were people who also had past felony convictions and thought that they were permanently disenfranchised from voting. And as you know, here in North Carolina, just a few weeks ago, 56,000 people's right to vote was unlocked. People who are on post-release, people who are on probation, people now have the right to vote. So I came into Down Home after running for office, watching our community come alive. I'm from Alamance County, where Ricky Hurtado, Representative Ricky Hurtado is from. Ricky is actually a friend of mine. He has been a community organizer in the community, and I know him from a group called Black and Brown Common Cause. So how exciting it was to have my own name on the ballot, and then the ballot of Ricky, to have Ricky on the ballot. And then there were others who were friends of us on the ballot as well. At the end of that election, I did not win, but I learned to redefine what a win was. I didn't win the election, but I got 34,000 votes. Ricky was elected into the House of Representatives as the first Latinx. And I received, in our Alamance County, our Black voter turnout increased 42%. And that's when I felt the call to leadership. And I came into Down Home as a member and came in on staff. And so I get to work with the Deep Canvas, and I get to work with all the other departments. And we have a plan. We have a plan to win. Working along with our state partners who are working in other areas of North Carolina, We are gonna, here at Down Home, we have a goal over the next 61 days to have 20,000 conversations. 20,000 conversations with people to make sure that they have voting plans, to make sure that they know about Sherry Beasley, to make sure that they understand and know what's on stake. And we need you. We need you to be a part of that. We're going to drop a link in the chat, and we're just looking for people who can sign up for shifts. We have about 8 shifts. We're looking to see if you can sign up for 1 shift a week. And if you could just sacrifice 3 hours of your time a week. Deep canvassing happens every week on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 6 until 9 o'clock until the election. So if you can't come one week, no worries. We'll be there the next week, and we hope that you can join us. We have a saying here at Down Home, and we say, come on in, there's work to do. I'm going to introduce my friend Nico and co-worker, who is a Deep Canvas lead trainer, and Nico is going to tell you more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dreama. And, you know, I've heard your story a few times now since working at Down Home, and every time I do, it gives me goosebumps. It's just so inspiring. I love to hear it. My name is Nico. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Deep Canvas lead trainer. And for me, the biggest issue this election season is the expansion of Medicaid. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is. When my dad lost his job in 2012, he was unable to afford to maintain his insulin supply. He made too much from unemployment to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to afford insurance. He was an ideal candidate for an expanded Medicaid. My sister and I, we tried to find some kind of affordable help. Like surely there was some institution nearby that we could go and source this medicine from. We ended up sourcing insulin from other diabetic family members, and it wasn't enough. In 2013, Dad suffered renal failure as well as a stroke from not having adequate insulin. He passed away at the age of 57. And I think every day that if Dad had had access to basic health care provided by Medicaid, he might be around to hang out with his grandkids. And what's really sad about this story is this isn't uncommon. This is a typical story in North Carolina of someone with a treatable illness not being able to afford treatment because of exorbitant drug prices and the limited access and availability of Medicaid. All over this country, Kim says in the chat. That's right, absolutely. But especially in states like North Carolina where we have not expanded Medicaid. For 17 years now, Richard Burr has fought progressive legislation from his very comfortable Senate seat. He's finally retiring. The midterms this November give us the opportunity to replace him with a true progressive. Sherry Beasley is the first Black woman to ever serve as Chief Justice on our North Carolina Supreme Court. Sherry is committed to protecting a woman's right to choose. She is committed to protecting a worker's right to organize. She was a big supporter of the PRO Act, for those of you who followed that. Most important for me, she supports the expansion of Medicaid, which our state so desperately needs. There are a lot of organizations right now during this election season that are phone banking for Sherry Beasley across the state. And those are all really important. Anyone who's doing work for Sherry Beasley right now, that's really important work. Our organization, Down Home, we're focused on phone banking specifically in rural areas across the state. And we use deep canvassing, as you've heard a little bit about tonight, to really impact the voters that we call. Every Wednesday and Thursday, we're facilitating a volunteer-based phone bank. It's online, so you can make calls from the comfort of your own home. You can even just make calls in your underwear if you like. You know, I do that a few times a week. It's really comfortable, especially in this hot summer. Our new volunteers, they get extensive training on deep canvassing and the auto dialer we use. We hold your hand. We make sure you are completely comfortable with the process before we turn you loose on the phones. We have a script you can follow step by step. We're going to walk you through it. You heard from Alondra earlier, which was great to hear from somebody who just started deep canvassing this year. She talked about her first time on the phones, and she's absolutely right. It can be a little scary at first. Sometimes you get hung up on, and sometimes people are rude, but that's not the majority of your experience. You know, when you finally get to really connect with a voter about the real issues that impact us, there's just nothing like it. So I want to make the ask tonight. How many folks here can we count on to get on the phones with us for Sherry? You just raise your hands, just put your hands up. Let's see. We've got a lot of folks. Diane, I know you're passionate about these issues. We need you on the phones with us. Rick? Okay, how about this? How many folks here can do both Wednesday and Thursday every week until the election? All right, Lucy, who else? Who else could be with us on the phones every week, twice a week? Okay, I'm not seeing a whole lot of hands, but that's okay. That's okay. What about like just one phone bank per week? Who can do that up until the election? Okay, Charlotte. Awesome. That is great. Rick, thank you, sir. We look forward to having you on the phones with us. What about 2 each month? Just 2 phone banks a month. Maybe one Wednesday, 1 week, a Thursday the next week. All right, y'all. Well, looks like we've got just over 30 folks who have signed up for phone banks. There are 81 people here tonight. Would love to get 50 more people to sign up. That would be amazing. So, you know, click that link, sign up. We would love to have you on the phone with us. And y'all keep signing up. And I'm going to pass it over to my teammate Shannon, who's going to close us out. Shannon.
Yes, thank you, Nico. So, hey, y'all. I am Shannon. I am a Deep Canvas team lead. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight. So I want everybody to come off mute and give yourself a round of applause for taking action. It's only right.
Woohoo! We can do this. Yes, thank you, because this fight,
Hey.
This fight is so important to the country as well as North Carolina. It's so much at stake for so many people right now. We have women's reproductive rights that are at risk all over the country, and especially here in North Carolina. We have our educational system, healthcare, and our economy is in jeopardy right now. So when we win, because we will, so we're just going to put that out there, we will be winning. And when we do, we will be sending the first African-American woman senator from North Carolina to Washington. And not only that, we'll also be turning that red seat to blue, because the future that we want for ourselves and our loved ones will be shaped by what happens on November 8th. So now is the time to fight. So for those of you all who did commit to joining us in our Deep Canvas phone banking nights, I want to personally thank you. And for those of you who have not quite yet decided, I urge you, please get involved. Please take action. The time is now, the time to get into some good trouble. And it's going to take all of us to get close to, it's going to take all of us to get to our goal to elect Sherry and realizing the future that works for us all. And I am not talking about the wealthy few. I'm talking about for us working folks. So let me just be real for a moment.
deep canvas conversations are the first step of social action, because nobody does anything without a conversation. Nobody does anything without knowledge or without the information. So that's why our deep canvas team, against all odds, are going to make sure that we do have 20,000 deep canvas conversations with our voters. We have a chance now to take back our democracy. And for me, I want my daughters to be able to make their own choices when it comes to their reproductive rights. And I want my grandma to have great health care so that she doesn't have to worry about our prescription, the cost of her prescription drugs. And I want my cousins who are in same-sex relationships to be able to get married and care for one another. And I also want a world where everyone thrives and has opportunity. So please, please, please join us. We have the Mobilize link in the chat. So go ahead, sign up. Let's get Mobilize jumping. And thank you all for coming out, and have a great night.
Thank you, Shannon, for that powerful close. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. We're gonna send us out with a little music. We can dance in our seats. Please feel free to stay if you have questions, if there's anything that we can answer for you. Our team will stay back. We're happy to answer those questions. But I want to urge you one last time, because now is the time, folks. 61 days till the election. Now is the time to get involved. These conversations are really powerful. And I think you'll thoroughly enjoy talking to other voters that share your values. So I hope you have a great evening, and thank you for coming. And I'll see you on Wednesday for the first phone bank. Good night.